At the end of the 80s, something changed forever. Motorcycles stopped being just fast, they became superbikes. Machines like the GSXR, the Ninja, and the Fireblade were born in an era with no limits, no controls, no fear. They were light, brutal, and dangerously addictive. It was the beginning of a war that would define modern motorcycling. Today we're going to travel back to the exact moment where it all began. The true Golden Age of Superbikes. In the 1970s, Japan didn't just enter the motorcycle world, it conquered it. Up until then, European brands like Norton, Triumph, and BMW dominated the market with fast but technically conservative bikes. Then, in 1969, Honda launched the CB750. And everything changed. 4 inline cylinders, a front disc brake, insane reliability, and a smoothness the world had never seen before. It was fast, modern, and could be used every day. It was, without exaggeration, the first modern superbike. But like every revolution, it had consequences. The problem wasn't with the engine. The problem was with everything else. The tubular steel chassis, inherited from much less powerful bikes, wasn't designed to handle the nearly 70 horsepower the engine produced. At high speeds, the frame would flex. In fast corners, the bike would twist. The suspension was soft, the tires were narrow, and the brakes, though advanced for their time, were still not enough for that kind of performance. For the first time in history, the engine had outperformed the rest of the bike. And then Kawasaki showed up with the Z1 in 1972 and made things even worse. 903 cubic centimeters, 82 horsepower, and a top speed of over 210 kilometers per hour. It was the fastest motorcycle on the planet. But its chassis, although improved, was still not enough for that kind of power. At high speeds, the steering would get light, the rear end would float, and there would be high-speed oscillations. What we now know as speed wobble was just a normal part of the experience. It was a bike designed to dominate the straightaways, not the curves. Suzuki responded with the GS1000 in 1978. A more refined, stiffer, and more stable machine, but still trapped by the same structural limitation. Engines were evolving faster than chassis engineering. Honda did the same with the CB900F, a bike capable of reaching speeds close to 225 kilometers per hour, with acceleration that rivaled the sports cars of the time. But even this refined and powerful machine suffered from the same problem. Frames that would flex, overloaded suspensions, and tires that simply weren't ready for that kind of stress. It was as if the engineers had discovered exactly how to construct high-performance Formula One hearts, but were still installing them on bicycle skeletons. This created a generation of bikes that were glorious but dangerous. In a straight line, they were unstoppable. The wind slammed against your helmet, the engine screamed at maximum revs, and the world turned into a blurry tunnel. But as soon as a fast curve appeared, reality set back in. The chassis would start to flex, the suspension would compress uncontrollably, and the rider realized they were closer to the limits of physics than to the limits of the machine. These bikes were fast, sure, but they weren't precise. They were powerful, but not smart. They were gods on the straightaway and existential questions in the corners. However, this chaos was necessary because it was this very danger that forced engineers to evolve. It was this same fear that led to the creation of the aluminum chassis and modern geometries, and to the superbikes we know today. Before the revolution, motorcycles were just engines with wheels. After the revolution, they would become precision weapons. In 1985, Suzuki didn't just launch a motorcycle. New. They launched a warming. Meanwhile, while the other brands kept building fast, heavy, and relatively comfortable street bikes, Suzuki decided to do something no one had dared to do before. Build a race bike and sell it to the public. That's how the GSX-R750 was born, a machine that not only changed the market, it changed the very definition of what a superbike was. Up until that moment, sport bikes were basically street bikes adapted to go fast. They had powerful engines, sure, but also comfortable seats, heavy frames, and geometry designed for everyday use. The GSX-R750 broke that mold. It was designed from the very beginning with one single priority: performance. Everything else was secondary. The Suzuki GSX-R750 was equipped with a 749cc inline four-cylinder engine that delivered around 100 horsepower at 10,500 RPM, impressive numbers for its time. But what truly made it revolutionary was its dry weight of just 176 kilos, something unthinkable in 1985. Thanks to its hybrid air-oil cooling system, SAX, and its advanced double-beam aluminum frame, it could reach about 240 kilometers per hour and accelerate from 0 to 100 in under 3.5 seconds. But the real game-changer wasn't its speed, it was its lightness. While its rivals weighed between 220 and 240 kilos, the GSX-R was 40 to 60 kilos lighter, which gave it a huge advantage in acceleration, braking, and especially in corners. It changed the concept of the superbike forever. Back in 1987, the engineers at Honda took a long look at exactly what Suzuki had managed to achieve with the legendary GSX-R750, and they realized something truly fundamental about the market. They saw that not every single rider out there actually wanted a high-performance bike that constantly tried to kill them on every sharp turn. While many enthusiasts definitely wanted raw speed, they also deeply craved a sense of total control, unwavering confidence, and absolute mechanical precision during their ride. And instead of joining the horsepower war, Honda did something much smarter. They created a bike that wasn't the most extreme, but the most balanced. That's how the Honda CB600F Hurricane was born. This bike wasn't designed to scare you, it was designed to teach you. Honda understood that real speed didn't just come from horsepower. It came from the rider's ability to use that power with confidence. The Hurricane wasn't just a scaled-down superbike. It was a completely new concept. A bike that combined real performance with ease of use. And that approach would change motorcycling forever. The Honda CB600F Hurricane was powered by a 598cc inline four-cylinder engine. Thank you. Capable of producing about 85 horsepower at 11,000 RPM. Combined with a dry weight of just 182 kilos, liquid cooling, high-precision Caheen carburetors, and an advanced chassis, a double aluminum beam frame allowed it to reach about 230 kilometers per hour and accelerate from 0 to 100 in just 3.8 seconds. However, the real secret wasn't just its engine, but the complete package. The aerodynamics were also revolutionary. The Hurricane was one of the very first motorcycles in its class to use a full fairing, meticulously developed inside of a wind tunnel, not simply to give it a sporty appearance, but to actually improve its overall high-speed stability. At speeds over 200 kilometers per hour, the bike stayed stable, with no vibrations or unexpected movements. This was something that many bigger bikes didn't have. They still couldn't achieve it. The Honda CB600F Hurricane was powered by a 598cc inline four-cylinder engine, capable of producing about 85 horsepower at 11,000 RPM. Combined with a dry weight at just 182 kilos, liquid cooling, high-precision Caheen carburetors, and an advanced aluminum twin-beam frame that allowed it to reach around 230 kilometers per hour and accelerate from 0 to 100 in just 3.8 seconds. However, the real secret wasn't just its engine, but the whole package, since that aluminum frame offered much greater rigidity than traditional steel ones, radically improving stability in fast corners, eliminating dangerous flexing, and allowing for much more precise, controllable, and predictable handling, something that redefined the behavior of modern sport bikes. In 1987, Yamaha introduced the FZR1000, a superbike that aimed not just to be fast, but to be precise. It featured the revolutionary Delta Box aluminum frame, derived from racing, which eliminated the dangerous flexing typical of bikes from that era. This allowed for a level of high-speed stability never seen before. For the first time, a leader bike could corner with confidence, not just blast down the straightaways. Its Genesis engine, with 989 cubic centimeters and 5 valves per cylinder, produced up to 145 horsepower, delivering power that was strong yet progressive. The big leap came with the X-Up system, which regulated exhaust flow to provide torque at low revs and power at high revs. This eliminated the harsh behavior typical of superbikes. The FZR1000 was no longer a violent bike. It was fast, controllable, and efficient across the entire rev range. With a top speed close to 280 kilometers per hour, the FZR1000 wasn't just fast. It was dangerously easy to handle. It didn't scare you, it didn't vibrate, it didn't warn you. It just accelerated. That absolute control changed the industry. It proved that a superbike could be both powerful and precise at the same time. The FZR1000 didn't just compete with its rivals. It redefined the concept of the modern superbike and set the standard that everyone else would follow. In 1987, Honda launched the RC30 with a clear goal in mind: to win the World Superbike Championship. It wasn't designed to be practical or accessible, but to homologate a race bike. Honda took its racing experience and turned it into a street-legal machine. It was a declaration of technological war, built to dominate both on and off the track, not to sell in mass numbers. Its 748cc V4 engine produced about 118 horsepower. But the important thing wasn't just the power, it was its precision. It used gears instead of a timing chain, which improved response, reliability, and mechanical accuracy. This allowed it to accelerate smoothly and with absolute control. It was an engine designed to withstand extreme use, with refined behavior and consistent performance, even at the limit. The double-beam aluminum chassis and single-sided swing arm made it unique. It was lightweight, rigid, and extremely precise in corners. Each unit was hand-assembled in Japan, with standards closer to a race bike than a production motorcycle. Everything was designed with a functional purpose, from the adjustable suspension to the optimized weight distribution. In competition, the RC30 dominated World Superbike, winning championships with Fred Merkel and cementing its place in history. It proved that a superbike had to be lightweight, precise, and race-derived. Its impact was so profound that it defined the DNA of modern superbikes. Today, it's a legend, not because of its top speed, but because it forever changed what a superbike means. When the GSXR750, the CBR600F, the FZR1000, and the RC30 showed what was possible, the rest of the industry panicked. Having power was no longer enough. The new battlefield was precision. Brands realized that the future wasn't about bigger engines, but about bikes that were stiffer, lighter, and more stable. The top priority became total control at high speed. The modern superbike was born, and nobody wanted to be left behind. Kawasaki responded with the ZX7, or ZXR750, a bike designed with racing DNA from the very first bolt, featuring an aluminum frame, aggressive geometry, and a stability that made it a force to be reckoned with on the track. It wasn't the most comfortable, but it was extremely effective when pushed to the limit. It was a bike that demanded respect, but rewarded the rider with surgical precision. Kawasaki made it clear they weren't going to let Honda and Suzuki dominate without a fight. Suzuki, for their part, took the concept to the extreme with the GSXR1000, a brutal engine with over 130 horsepower in a chassis that was relatively lightweight for its time. It was fast in a straight line, devastating in acceleration, and physically intimidating. It wasn't a friendly bike, but it offered a visceral experience. It was the superbike in its purest form. Uncompromising power. If you mastered it, you were unstoppable. If not, the bike would remind you who was really in charge. But then, in 1992, Honda completely changed the rules of the game once again by introducing the revolutionary CB900RR Fireblade, a machine that redefined performance standards. And this time, the revolution wasn't about power. It was about weight. At just 185 kilos dry, it weighed almost the same as a 600, but had superbike power. This completely transformed the way people understood speed. It was no longer just about hard acceleration, but about changing direction quickly, braking later, and having better control over every move. The Fireblade introduced a new philosophy. Real speed doesn't just come from the engine. It comes from balance, from its compact geometry, its short wheelbase, and its mass centralization made it incredibly agile. It was a bike that responded instantly to the rider. It didn't intimidate with brute force. It invited you to go faster. And that made it more dangerous than any other. The Fireblade wasn't the most powerful, it was the most dangerous, because it made something easy that used to be impossible, going absurdly fast without even realizing it. This moment marked the peak of the Golden Age of Superbikes. Between 1988 and 1995, bikes stopped being just fast machines. They became precision weapons. Each new generation was lighter, stiffer, and more efficient. Modern superbikes were born out of this war, and the world of motorcycling was never the same again. Between 1985 and 1995, Japan didn't just build bikes, it built character, it built obsession, it built machines that didn't ask for permission. There were no riding modes, no traction control, no electronic maps to save you. There were frames as rigid as promises, engines that revved like the world was ending tomorrow, and brakes that depended more on your courage than on a sensor. They weren't perfect, they weren't comfortable, they weren't forgiven. They were honest. If you messed up, you knew it. If you got it right, you flew. That's where modern superbikes were born. Not on touchscreens, not in digital simulators. They were born in a war. A war where Suzuki wanted to be lighter, where Honda wanted to be smarter, where Yamaha wanted to be more technological, and where Kawasaki refused to settle for second place. Engineers who never slept, riders who never let up, and a decade where every year felt like a revolution. Today, bikes are faster, safer, more efficient, but there's something they don't make anymore. That moment when you twisted the throttle, not knowing if the bike would obey or remind you who was really in charge. Because modern bikes are incredible, but legends were born in the Golden Age, and that age doesn't come back. It lives on in memory.